Welcome to Emotional Resilience, Living with the Fruit of the Spirit. I'm your host and author, Ron Ovitt. Today we're on Lesson 19, Memories and Emotions. You know, we started back earlier in the lessons talking about the brain, talking about attachment, that early childhood, right, and the relationship styles that we pick up. We talked about emotions and our beliefs, and today we're going to talk about memory, another important part of who we are. In fact, I would say that today's lesson is going to be one of the most exciting ones that I ever worked on. It wasn't that long ago when I was working on this, we've been teaching this for 15 years, that I came across some writings about the memories and how there's explicit memory and implicit memory, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But it really explains where a lot of our emotions come from. And that was such a relief to have some knowledge of knowing why we behave the way we behave. Why do we think the way we think? Why do we have the emotions we have? When I was younger, in my anxiety, in my early 20s and 30s, and when I was in the ministry, I was working hard, I was functional, but a lot of the anxiety was happening and I didn't know why. And back then they talked about the subconscious mind. Or in the Christian circles, they talked about the demonic. And both of them left me with this what's going on kind of feeling. And I would cry out to God, Lord, help me with my subconscious mind. Lord, I rebuke Satan and the demons, right? And I learned a lot about spiritual warfare, and I learned about the mind. And as I studied more, memory came up. And so today I hope that you'll start to see how important this is, and I encourage you to read it. Read it again. Go through these things, study it, underline, and it's going to take time. I've been teaching this a long time, so it comes natural to me at this point. But I had to read it a couple times to really start understanding. I mean, you're learning new words, right? Implicit memory, explicit memory, what's that mean, right? But you'll get it. As you look at the material, you read it, you pray, you say, Lord, give me understanding, right? The Bible says get wisdom, and with wisdom, get understanding. And I hope today will be some understanding for you, okay? Well, we're talking about memories. Many of our emotions are based on assumptions. The effect of false assumptions and beliefs play a lot to do with our emotions. When we're younger, we have family situations we were born into. And, the truth is, many of us were in a family that might have been dysfunctional. Some researchers say that 70% of the families are dysfunctional in some degree or another. Other researchers say that over half the population has had lingering emotions and wounded inner self-beliefs due to trauma and attachment pain. And trauma can produce injury to our human spirit, and they lead to false assumptions and beliefs about ourselves. Why? Because trauma hurts. And unfortunately, it happens to us a lot in childhood, and we don't know why. We want to know why, and the only thing that makes sense is has to do with me, right? It's my fault. There's something wrong with me. And when you look at the early part of the lesson today, you'll see that I've listed a bunch of false assumptions that can happen out of a traumatic background, that happen out of childhood. Some of them, like I'm broken, or there's something really wrong with me. Nothing works for me. People don't really care. They just fake it. I don't deserve love. I'm unlovable. I can't trust anyone. There's a whole list here. And you'll be surprised how deep down we believe some of these assumptions. And it causes havoc in our life. They're not true, and it becomes our norm. It's hard sometimes to really take the time and look at these and say, do I really believe these? Now, at first glance, you say, well, of course not. But I'm not talking about an intellectual belief. I'm talking about a felt belief. Have I ever felt that I'm unlovable? See, children, when they learn, when they subscribe to assumptions, it's not an intellectual thing more than it's a felt thing. They believe it. It's an emotional learning. That's why we talk about emotional relearning. It's the emotional learnings that stick with us. And so we want to try to find out in the weeks to come, what are some of these assumptions that we have? What do we need to change? You know, distorted thinking doesn't always seem like distorted thinking. Why? Because it's our norm. It's what we're used to. It's what we believe. Like most distortions, they're close to the real thing. And so we buy the lies about ourselves, and we go on feeling these negative emotions over and over again, and it causes more pain or more trauma, and it just reinforces it. Think of the young child that feels they're socially inadequate. There's something wrong with them. They're never going to be popular. And somehow they learn that. Maybe it was in the neighborhood, maybe it was a family, but now they're going to school. And so they walk down the hallway, and they got kind of the walk of shame, right? And they know the popular kids are over there. They're laughing, they're having fun, and so they can't help it. They look, and then they look back. Keeps walking, and he had to look again, and he sees one of them just laughing, and their eyes catch. And right then he turns his head and turns down. Who do you think he feels that person's laughing at? Well, them. Now, that person could have been laughing about anything, but right then it was reinforced in his mind, emotionally, there's something wrong with me. I'll never be good enough. You see how that goes? And it happens hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. These things are reinforced. And so that's why a lot of times it's hard to really grasp them. One, it's our norm. Two, it's painful to believe these things. Now, here's the good news. It's not true. You know, it's not true. These are lies, but we have to get to a place where we can learn these. And a lot of these things then cause memories. They came out of memories, they came out of experience. It's experiential, emotional beliefs, right? They came out of experiences, therefore, there's emotions and memory attached to them. There's a memory attached to these emotions. But the question is, what kind of memory? And that's where we get into some pretty exciting stuff. There's two different kinds, if you will, memories. There's the explicit memory, and there's an implicit memory. Now, explicit is what we normally think of outside, right? It's our outside memory. It's what we see. It's what we think. It's what happened. We recall an event in our life. I had lunch at the restaurant yesterday. I got a pony for my 12th birthday or something. Those are explicit memories, right? They're memories, they're biographical memories that we can recall. Implicit memories are memories that don't need conscious executive control by the brain. They're procedural, and they're, a result of skill or repetition. So one form of implicit memory is a procedural memory, right? When you get in your car, you don't have to sit there and think, gee, how do I start the car? You start it right up. You don't, you see your toothbrush, you don't go, how do I brush my teeth? I mean, we have procedural memory. We do it without thinking. That's implicit. But then there's another kind. There's that sensation, emotional kind of memory. It's that part of implicit memory that remembers memories involving our senses. Again, it's without conscious effort. For example, you may smell a certain perfume and it reminds you of your grandmother. You may hear a certain song and it reminds you of the junior high dance. Those are implicit memories that just all of a sudden you're there. It also works with our danger zone, our emotional center of the brain, that amygdala and the limbic area, right? That's where we get our strong emotions of fear, terror, anger. It's the alarm center. What happens is that when something happens in trauma, our brain remembers the sensations. What happens is that when we're in an emergency, cortisol is pumped through our body, and it's pumped through our body, and all of a sudden it shuts down the hippocampus, which is the part of the assembler of our memories that causes the explicit memories. Our biographical kind of memories is done through the hippocampus. But in an emergency, when it's fight and flight and all that, that cortisol is pumping. Now the amygdala, that part of the limbic part of the brain, is on guard and it's watching. And it memorizes then what's happening, but it doesn't think in terms of like we like to think, like a video. Instead, it looks for the dangerous things. It could be a tone of voice. It could be a look on a face. It could be body language. It could be proximity. It could be smells. It could be touch. Anything that was perceived dangerous will be remembered. And then when we see something in the future that's similar to that, boom, all of a sudden the alarms go off. It's called predictive coding. It's a predictive coding in our brain. And so we don't remember so much with our brain as much as we do our heart, our guts, our body. All those things signal us that there's something wrong. And this comes out of trauma. And you can read the lesson, and I encourage you to really read it, go over it, go through the discussion questions, and you'll read in there about trauma and the memory. Dr. Bruce Perry writes in his book or article on persisting psychophysiological effects of trauma, he says this: many individuals who experience traumatic events develop a distinct set of physical signs and symptoms. These symptoms tend to fall in three clusters. One, recurring intrusive recollection of the traumatic events, sort of like dreams and flashbacks, right? That happens in post-traumatic stress disorder. Two, a persistent avoidance of stimuli associated with the trauma. And so all of a sudden, you feel this urge, you don't want to go there, it's danger, right? Something happens like that. Third, a persistent symptoms of increased arousal characterized by hypervigilance, increased startle response, sleep difficulties, irritability, anxiety, and physiological hyperactivity. Now, I encourage you to read that maybe again, and understand, but you can see that a lot of times these symptoms, look at those symptoms. If those are some of the symptoms you have, then chances are you've had a trauma and your body is remembering some of the things that were going on. Gregory Burns writes this: neuroscientists have come to realize that how you perceive something isn't simply a product of what your eyes and ears transmit to your brain. It's a product of your brain itself. He says, for example, we know that sensations, touch, facial expressions, tone of voice, etc., can set off a certain emotional direction. He writes this: this is because perception is largely a result of statistical expectations. Experience modifies the connections between neurons so that they become more efficient in processing information. Neuroscientists have observed that while an entire network, this is important, while a whole entire network of neurons, right, might process a stimulus initially, right, trauma and all the things that are going on, by the sixth presentation, or by the sixth time we've been alarmed, right, and all that, and it's caused us trauma, right, the heavy lifting is performed only by a subset of neurons. So otherwise, it says it doesn't need to go as deep. It sees a few things and boom, it's off and running. The brain is a predicting machine. But the brain also conserves energy. And so that means the brain takes this path of least resistance and goes down a familiar trail. It could be completely wrong, but left unchallenged will continue to predict danger in the form of emotional and even physical pain when there really isn't any. So the question is, what can we do? And Burns says this, he said, fortunately, the networks that govern both perception and imagination can be reprogrammed. Isn't that exciting? I put you through all this psychological talk where you can listen to this right here. The good news, he says, the networks that govern both perception and imagination can be reprogrammed. By deploying your attention differently, by reacting differently, the frontal cortex, which contains rules for decision making, can reconfigure the neural networks so that you can see things that you did not see before. Please read that again, okay? Try to understand how significant that is. If you're reacting certain ways and you're not sure why, it could be because of the implicit memories that you have are triggering you. And here's the good news. We can discover that and we can change it. You see, memories are adaptive information processing. They're associations. They're associations. They get stored in associated networks. Therefore, depending on whether they're processor, they can be an explicit memory that we remember, or they can be implicit, which comes when we're alarmed through our sensations. And that's why it's so important that we want to recognize when we're starting to be triggered. Emotional recognition. Then we want to be able to regulate ourselves. Come back to, breathing, to relaxing. Why? Where we can understand what's going on and we can start to emotionally relearn the truth. If we believe that I have to perform in order to be loved, that if I'm not, take me, a people pleaser, right? I've had to work on that a lot in my life. If I believe that if you're mad at me, I'm going to die, right? There's something catastrophic going to happen. I have to please you. Then I'm going to be triggered every time you have a frown on your face, right? Every time you look at me a certain way. You could go, Ron, could you come here? I'd like to talk to you. Whoa, boom, elevated emotion, right? Well, if I can start to see that, relax and calm it down, reassess the situation and say, what am I believing here? I'm believing I'm going to die. I'm not going to die if he's upset with me. Now that's an emotional relearning. And what he's saying here is if I can react differently, have my attention going a different way, I can change then the neuronal structuring. And that's what it's doing. When I start to react differently, right, I relax and start thinking differently, it's going to change over time. Because remember, we repeated these things over and over and over and over and over again. But with time, we're going to be able to change the way we respond. And that's so exciting. And so I go through the lesson there talking about how memories work, and you can read that. But the part that's really exciting is where I say, good news, we can change the reactive state of the memory. And the first thing we need to do is become our own observer. We need to learn to become our own observer. We cannot regulate our emotions or emotionally relearn new healthy emotional responses to life if we're not aware of our present emotional reactions. So we need to start being able to notice what's happening, know when we're triggered. We want to really work on emotional recognition. The realization of transitory condition of emotions allows us to experience our emotion, but not become our emotions, no matter how severe they feel. We can experience anxiety, but we do not have to stay anxious. We can experience a depressed moment, but don't have to be depressed. Now, Linda Graham, in her book Bouncing Back, says this: observing and reflecting allows us to step back from the experience of the moment and observe it from a larger field of awareness that is not any of those experiences. That is, larger than any of those patterns. With awareness, we can begin to see different possibilities for responding. Isn't that exciting? Isn't that exciting? We have a choice today. We can choose to respond differently by becoming aware. When we start to recognize that a lot of these things are coming from lies, that they're not true. I'm not going to die. I'm not nothing. I'm not broken, damaged goods. When I can start to see that, I can change a lot of these. And so I call it changing memories, change your life. I call it emotional relearning. Emotional relearning. And it's a process of disproving the lies, the irrational, negative beliefs about ourselves and life and God behind those emotional urges and replacing them with the truth. Replacing them with the truth as we learn the truth about who we really are, as we learn the truth about who God is, as we learn the truth about life, we can begin to change. And we'll be going over this a lot in lessons to come. And the goal of our emotional relearning is more than extinguishing the emotions of a memory. It's to emotionally relearn the truth. And so we go back to a memory and we bring a new knowledge to it. And the knowledge counterdicts then the conclusion and the predictions made at the time of the original memory. And the knowledge, it comes from a powerful, credible, and most of all, believable source. And when we have that source, it could be God, it could be our more mature self, it could be someone who loved us that can explain the truth in that memory. It changes us. It changes us. Relearning from a current believable source disproves the power that we gave that person. It disproves the belief that we have because of that experience. And it can be a life-changing thing. And so what we want to do is we want to disconfirm the alarming beliefs from our explicit memory, and we want to affirm the truth of who we are. We want to alter the negative predictions due to the lies, and we want to affirm more optimistic predictions of future reactions to memory. And we want to decondition the reaction to the memory and recondition a new response to that memory. And that's all part of it. And so we're looking for what we call an orienting response, a trigger, right? Something that triggers us. And we want to start to find out why, what's going on. And so it's important that we get in touch with some of these memories. And so one way that we do it, and one way that we can start to slow down some of our reactions, is to learn a memory and then emotionally write about it. And in this lesson, I want you to look at emotional writing. And so I've given you in the back of the program your life review. Now this was something that's out there in the AA world. There's no copyright to it. I don't know who to attribute it to, but I thought it was a real good form. And so people can use it, and so I've included in here. You go through it, and it takes you through your life, and it helps you see different kinds of events that went on that may have been traumatic, and you can just write them so you have something to think about. And then what we want to do, part of relearning, is going through this emotional writing. It's been proven out there that this kind of writing can improve mood, reduce worry, improve our memory, reduce hypervigilance, can even work with us in relationships. It works with our immune system as we can reduce a lot of the worry and stress and all this hyperactivity and hypervigilance that goes on. We become more emotionally sound and physically sound. And so it's an easy process. It only takes a few minutes a day. You take an emotional experience, you write about it, you free form it, right? And then you just throw it away. It's not journaling. You're not there to write, something and, oh, gee, I remember this, and then you keep it in the journal. No, this is expressive writing. Boy, I remember this, and you can use the language you want. You can flare it, you can write, you can draw, whatever, and then you throw it away. It's a catch and release, if you will, right? It's emotional. You're writing about it. It shouldn't take no more than a few minutes, no more than 20 minutes, but you go and you write down about something that bothers you, and you can start with some of the past events. That's why I want you to go through your life review and write about some of those moments that may be come to your recollection. Boy, I remember when this happened, and you write about it, and you express yourself, and you throw it away. And I first heard about this kind of writing years ago when I was having chronic pain and I was working with it. And one method of helping with that was to emotionally write. It seemed to get rid of some of those emotional things that kept stress going through your body. And what we're trying to do here is release the past. And so this is going to help us two ways. One, it's going to help us get in touch with some of the memories. It's going to help us get in touch with some of the things that may have shaped some of the things that we're believing today, that we aren't even fully aware of yet. And it's also going to help take away some of the emotional importance of it. It's going to allow us to express ourselves and throw it away, and that throwing it away is very, very key. But here's something I want you to remember, okay? And it's the don't do it rule. If at any time you feel that one of the incidences in the past that you want to write about is too difficult, don't do it. Don't do it. If you're in the middle of one and it's getting too overwhelming, stop. We're not trying to re-traumatize yourself. You may want to write that one down and find someone that you can talk to, someone that you trust, a counselor, and process that, because obviously it's important, but we're not here to just try to traumatize you. The second thing is, you can type it. I know a lot of us type when we work with computers, but frankly, they found that the handwriting is really a better way to do it. There's something, a way it connects with the brain, and the handwriting really, I think, is a better way to do it. The third is set a timer. You don't, here again, if you overdo it, then you won't do it the next time. You want to do this over and over again. When you feel the urge, you want to be able to do it. So go ahead, and then balance is the final thing. Once you get some of the negative out of the way, I'd say a third of the time, do a gratitude one. Write some positive things. But I think you'll find that this emotional writing is really something exciting that can help you, and will also bring back some of the memories. So we're going to continue this in the lessons to come, but I encourage you to look at the life in review. See if there's some significant moments out there. You don't have to dwell on them right now, but see if there might not be some significant moments that may have shaped the way you feel, the way you think, the way you believe. And with the Lord's help, we're going to go through, we're going to process, and we're going to emotionally relearn. That's to come in lessons as we go forward. So God bless you. Read the lesson again, do the discussion questions, do the life in review. We'll see you next time.